One sport, millions of voices. This is Rugby Unity.
I am David Pembroke and Eddie Jones. Welcome back for another week.
Hey, Pemby. So, mate, what's caught your eye this week?
For me this week, I think the interesting announcements really, or they came out of a press conference that Brett Robinson gave in Sydney to announce the broadcast deals for Australia, not only for 2027, but through until 2031. But he was talking about rugby in the United States and the confirmation that the board of World Rugby will be taking to the Rugby Union Council this week, the confirmation that World Rugby will proceed with the World Cups in the US in 2031 and 2033, which I think is pretty big news. Obviously, the North American sports market is enormous, and in terms of the future prosperity of the game in around the world, the presence of rugby union in North America is going to be a significant contributor to that over time. So I think taking the World Cup there and confirming that the World Cups will go ahead is big news. And then obviously there's detail underneath that, which we'll get to in a minute as well. But what's your views on rugby in North America, having been exposed to it through the coaching of the Japan team?
Well, the reality is it's really gone nowhere. I think we first played against America in around 2012. They were sitting around the same area as Japan in the table, had a pretty strong team. In fact, I first coached against America in 1997, I think it was, for Japan. 1996 for Japan versus America. We beat them in Tokyo. And I remember the coach, who was a bloke called Jack Clark, put his hand through the dressing room, which was quite eventful in Japan. And then we went back and played them 2 weeks later in San Francisco. And the guy who's actually our team director now was our reserve halfback, and he had to come on at number 10 at the start of the game. And if he was riding at Randwick in a weight for age race, they'd have to put extra weight on him, right? He's flipping tiny, mate. Anyway, they just ran him. We got beaten 76-3 after beating him in Tokyo 2 weeks earlier. So that was America back then. And every time you go back, nothing's really changed, mate. You know, they've got the MRL in place. They promised to take rugby more seriously, but it really hasn't. It's a minor sport, but obviously there's the allure of the American market and whether the sport itself can find a niche in the American sporting landscape's a big question.
So why don't you think it's been able to go forward? Is it because of the dominance of the big American professional sports like basketball, like American football, hockey, and obviously lots of other professional sports in the States? Is it just too crowded for rugby?
I was thinking the analogy is a bit like basketball in Australia. So, yeah, you're a bit younger than me, but when you were growing up in Australia, when I was growing up, there's only two major things you did. You swum or you played cricket in the summer, and then in the winter you either played rugby league or rugby union. And if you couldn't play anything else, then you'd play soccer or you'd play. Even then, back then there was an Aussie rule, and there wasn't really basketball at all. And now basketball is a more predominant sport in Australia, as it is around the world. And that's all come back on the back of the NBA. You know, the NBA being really good at promoting their competition, promoting the best players in the world, being aggressive in going around the world and running, talent camps, making it accessible to people. You know, young players making it accessible. They've got a chance to play NBA because they can go to these camps, and it attracts them. And you go to anywhere in the world now and you see the visibility of NBA. In rugby in around the world, we've never really had that approach, because I was thinking about it just before we came on air. Rugby's so decentralised. Like, we've got a centralised union in the World Rugby who in large way, apart from a number of circumstances, have been ineffectual in spreading the game. You know, we've got to be quite honest about that. They've been quite ineffectual in spreading the game. Maybe they've had a good result in Japan because of the 2019 World Cup. That helped Japan, but in other countries it really hasn't had that effect. So how do we make the game more attractive for young Americans to play? Like, that's got to be the key question. Because if they want to play rugby, they see it as a option for them to play, and young people want to play, then parents get involved and the whole thing starts.
Well, that's, I suppose, at that community level, which sits underneath it at the university level. But my understanding, and I do want to actually in a few weeks' time take a deeper dive into rugby in North America as a potential market, and where we can bring some evidence to the table to work through it. But while there may not be the community game as strong as it needs to be, it certainly seems to be very strong in the university and in the college market over there. There seems to be huge opportunities to play the game, both, all across America, that there are lots of competitions at that university level, but obviously that's the age group above what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I still think, mate, and I don't know the facts, but it's very much a Category B sport. It's not a major sport there. It's a minor sport. Yeah, I think they used to have a term, the Canadians and Americans, they used to talk about rugby being this radical sport, you know, for guys who like to bash each other, drink, and it was seen as this sort of out there type of sport, not a proper sport to play. But I think, you know, there's definitely some evidence that it's taking some roots, particularly in women's rugby. I think women's rugby's done quite well in the universities. And again, you look at the standings in world rugby, the women's team has done much better comparatively to the men.
So a couple of the things that Brett Robinson raised in this media conference also is taking big games, big test matches to the United States. Obviously, we'll see the All Blacks and Ireland play in Chicago later this year, a repeat of an event that they did a couple of years ago, which was very, very successful. But there's talk about bringing other Tier 1 nations and Tier 1 nation rugby test matches to the United States, and also potentially having professional teams on the East Coast may be involved in the United Rugby Championship, and on the West Coast being involved in Super Rugby. What's your views about those types of initiatives?
Well, I think that's all really good. Creating rugby events in America will create interest, and we've seen it with the NRL. You know, the NRL started the Las Vegas almost like a pre-season opener, opening season festival, and it seems like, I don't have the facts and figures again, but it seems like it's taken off. And if rugby can do that with regular big tests in America, of course it'll create a following. You know, if the tests are good enough quality and it's marketable, all those sort of things, which I think we can say could happen. But what needs to happen is that underneath that, there needs to be a building up of the infrastructure of rugby to support it. Like last night, for instance, Pemby, I was in Oita. So we've got Japan 15's about to play New Zealand universities in Hong Kong for a series of games. So I had dinner with 6 guys who run the Oita Rugby Club, right? So Oita's this industrial town in Kyushu, 1 million people. Cannon's got 4 factories here. They hosted the quarterfinal of the World Cup in 2019, where England played Australia. And they got a beautiful stadium. And it's a big rugby in terms of kids rugby. It's a big area. So they got these 6 guys run the biggest school in Oita. So they train Saturday, Sunday, each day for 3 hours. Yeah, and these guys are in renewable energy. They're just volunteers. But they just wanted to talk about coaching last night. And the big thing that they wanted to talk about was, because everyone in rugby now, you watch rugby and you see how well organised the teams are. There's a really big debate going on underneath rugby about, right, do we coach kids to improve their skills, or do we coach kids to get organised? And the trend over the recent time has been to get kids organised because it's easier to win when you're organised, which makes sense because developing their skills takes time. But these guys are actually at the forefront of developing rugby players. And you've got to have that in America. You've got to start at some stage. You've got to start that in America. And volunteer sport's not a part of the American culture, is it? Everyone gets paid. So that's obviously a sticking point. Because if you need to pay these coaches, you're not going to be then parents have to pay. And then why would parents pay their kids to go to a rugby school when they can go to a baseball school or a NFL school where potentially the income they can get from the resources they put in is much bigger than rugby. So I think there's all those sort of difficult things that need to be looked at and investigated and sorted out, because you can't just do it at the top level. I think, as you said, you've got to be able to do it all through the levels of rugby. And Fiji's a great example, mate, of a team or a country that's found out a better structure for them that doesn't mirror any other country, but they've been able to develop their talent much better. They've got the Fiji Warriors, who are basically the players who play on the island, that then morphs into the Drua, that plays in Super Rugby. And then, of course, they've got most of their best players playing in France, so they've got a system to monitor most of their players in France. And then all of those three levels then fill into the Fijian team. And because of that, they've been able to their talent's been much better optimised. There's still problems there, and there's still a country that I think, at the moment they've been consistently around the 9-10. They're a country who could break into that 6-7 bracket.
And that's an example of collaboration and cooperation, really, isn't it? With World Rugby working with Rugby Australia, New Zealand Rugby, and also the domestic rugby unions as well, to put that in place, to put the funding in place, to give them the opportunities to be able to develop their players.
Yeah, I think one of the guys who really deserves a lot of accolades there is Peter Horn, who's now the high performance manager for Australia. But he was the tier 2 high performance manager for, it must have been close to 10 years. And he was one of the driving forces to give Fiji the ability to access funding, to develop a system, to develop facilities on the island that allow those young players to come through. So he's done a great job with Fiji, and also was instrumental in helping Japan. And now he's got the opportunity to help Australia, which is great. Good fella. He's from your area, mate. Tuggeranong Valley.
He is.
He's from the Valley.
He is. And doing a very good job with Australia. You can see the incremental improvement since he's been in charge. So methodical, thoughtful, obviously a very good rugby man, a good people person, and doing a great job with Australia, and certainly looking forward to the team that he can help to contribute to for the British and Irish Lions series that comes in a few weeks' time, which I'm certainly looking forward to as well. I suppose the other thing also is that the new council meets this week in London. Are they able to put the fan at the centre of some of these deliberations? And I know over the last couple of weeks I've popped a few ideas forward about putting the fans in the centre, at the centre of deliberation, because I certainly believe that is the future to securing the prosperity of rugby. But I do think it will take time. So, for example, last week when you pulled me up about the World Rugby fan event rather than making it a invitation-only event in Monaco. But where I'm trying to get with that really is that I think it layers on. It's a whole series of activities over time, and I think I would love to see more consideration given at the board level of World Rugby, at the council level, where they start to put the fan at the centre of their deliberations, like the famous Amazon story where every meeting they leave a chair vacant to represent the voice of the customer. so is it in every meeting that they have. The customer is sitting there with them. And I hope that in the deliberations this week at the board level at World Rugby and also at the council level, that we're talking not just about competitions, we're not just talking about processes and structures and procedures and other things, but we have the voice of the customer and the voice of the fan represented in all of those conversations. So anyway, that's enough of me. What about you? What caught your eye this week?
The thing that struck me, I was really pleased to see how well James O'Connor's been doing for the Crusaders. There was one of the kids who was one of the most talented players to come through Australia. He had everything. When he was coming out of the Gold Coast, every Super Rugby team was chasing him. I remember I was at the Reds. We met with him. He was rugby league. We were interested in him. He was one of these precocious talents. Great footwork, speed. He was fast for a little guy. But he had some success and then he probably lost his way a fair bit. And it's really good to see him come back and be that senior player at the Crusaders and help a developing young team, albeit on the wrong side of the ditch, helping young players. And I think he's finding his joy back in rugby. I think he's really enjoying the game. And I've sort of kept in contact with him a little bit because we had him, on the periphery of the 2023 World Cup. But I'm really pleased to see how well he's doing. And again, it shows you that the importance of the player, how you've got to develop good players in your country, and then you've got to look after them well.
How do you go about that as a coach when, someone like James O'Connor, as you say, he's been in, he's been out, he's travelled the world, he's played in all sorts of different teams in different ways, perhaps never realising that enormous potential he had early. As a coach who's looking at someone like that, how do you engage with them at that personal level to try to help them to realise their potential? Because, as you say, the way he is playing with such authority at the Crusaders would suggest that he's in a very good space in a personal sense.
Yeah, well, I think it always comes down and always has been, mate. And you can show it in a number of ways. It's always care before correction. You've always got to show the player you care about them. And if they know you care about them, you've got a chance of finding an access point in them where you can connect and then get them to either, work a little bit harder or work specifically on the area of the game that's going to improve them or just change their attitude a little bit. And that's what you're always looking for, mate.
But that notion of care, how do you identify where each individual player needs that connection around understanding? How do you activate that care? How do you show that? And is every player different?
Every player is completely different, mate. Every player is completely different. And you've got to experiment a little bit. You've got to find a way to develop some sort of connection with that player. But the first thing is obviously showing interest in them. Showing interest in them, watching, observing them at training, praising them when they've done something well, when they haven't done something well, remind them maybe they can do it a little bit better. And it's a constant process of observing the player. And the big skill there is the observation skills, observing people.
But is it also knowing them beyond the rugby environment? So it's understanding what their interests might be, what their family situation might be. Do you need to know that stuff, or is that less important?
Well, I think for some players it's really important, mate. For other players, not so important. Again, there's a line of how much people let you into their lives and their understanding. For some people, their families, everything, and you need to know that. For other people, it's more about, or other players, it's more about playing the game. The game's the most important thing. Just worry about the game. So completely different for everyone.
Okay, well, I suppose we will leave it there. But coming up after the break, our discussion about the TMO.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby Unity.
So, Eddie Jones, we promised last week and have promoted on social media that we will talk about the television match official and the operation of the television match official. Introduced in 1999, so that's a long time ago, but it's found its way probably to the centre of the most, I don't know, it triggers people. So, about the game, there is a lot of positivity towards it because I think people believe that it delivers justice, it delivers fairness, and certainly plays an important role in keeping players safe. But on the other side, there are probably not as many, but certainly an agitated minority who think perhaps it's overused and over-relied upon. So perhaps just to get started, what's your view about technology in the sport? Should we have it? Should we not have it? And then we'll look in more detail about how it is working at the moment.
Well, firstly, mate, I don't think there's a question of whether we have it or don't have it. I think it's how we can use it more effectively. And if you think about when it was first introduced, there was two key areas it was introduced for. So there's a debate whether it started in 99 or 95, because the South Africans used it early in the piece in 95. And it's interesting because you play in South Africa, you'd never get any calls. So I don't know how they used the TMO. But anyway, it was two things, 2 phases before a try to work out did anything untoward happen 2 phases before a try, and firstly for potential foul play. Now that was the objective and the purpose of the TMO. So if you look at that, the objective is 1, to make the game safer, and 2, to make the game more accurate in scoring points. Because the purpose of rugby is the most obvious thing is to score 1 more point than the opposition. So the point scoring is important. Now that's morphed into something much greater than that. It's the safety aspect's obviously still there, but I don't know whether it's all about safety now when we're making calls. And then the second thing is accuracy. We can't use the TMO for accuracy in the game, for everything, because we've got a game that's a contestable game. So rugby's a balance between contest and continuity. And every time we've got a contest for the ball, we've got one side doing it right, one side doing it wrong. And there's always a potential penalty there. So if we go down this accuracy, which we've tried to do in a half-hearted way, because if we want it to be 100%, we've got to call everything. And if we did that, the game it'd be longer than 3 hours, and then all the financial worries of rugby would be over, mate, because they could charge a lot more for tickets, charge the television lot longer shows, but most people would be bored witless watching it, as I get bored now watching the game. This endless incursion of the TMO into the game. So I think we need to go back and be very clear about it, that we want it to be more accurate about point scoring. So go 2 phases before a try. You can check anything 2 phases before a try, right? And but it needs to be done quickly, and they need people in there that they know what they're looking at, right? And then secondly, if there's a potential red card, which is foul play, then the TMO can come in and we stop the game, we check it, because if it's a red card, the player's got to leave the field. If it's just a yellow card, like someone slips in a tackle and they get hit on the head, then put the player on report and do all the necessary checking after the game. And if it then morphs, if they think it's a foul play, then it can be dealt with after the game. So in that way, we can still have the safety of the game in place. We can still have the accuracy of point scoring in place, but we can have a better flow of the game. Because at the moment, the TMO takes all the flow out of the game. Okay, and that's a real danger for the game, because then we become this stop-start game. And the more we make the game stop-start, the more we go away from the charter of the game, which was to allow players of every body size to play the game. And the more we make it stop-start, the more we encourage sides to play mammoth packs. Like, we've seen South Africa go 7-1. When's the team going to go 8-0 in terms of being able to replace their whole forward pack? And it'll happen. It'll happen. I don't think we're too far away from it. Is that the sort of game we want? Because if we keep making it stop-start, we will.
So do you believe that the TMO has contributed to South Africans' strategic decisions about their composition of their pack?
Oh, look, I'm not worried about what South Africa do, but I'm worried about the direction of the game. If we keep making the game stop-start, all we do is encourage bigger, more physical players, and we'll get to the stage where it'll kill the game.
Why do you believe this behaviour around accuracy has come into the role of the TMO? Why has that become a focus as opposed to the original intent, which was, support for the try scoring and for, the safety of the game?
Because I think like most things in life, that when you introduce something, it tends to have more significance, importance, and the team has grown over a period of time to become significantly important. Whereas at the first stage, it was accelerated to have a better game, and now it's become the driver of the better game. And we've got to get it back to being accelerated of a better game. And again, if I use the NRL as an example, they had a weekend, I think 2 weeks ago, where they had sin bins going through the roof and the fans are blowing up, because the game's so stop-start, and the CEO comes on and on the television on the Monday night and says, right, we've got this wrong. And the next week, what happens? Sin bin gets cut by, 40%, whatever it was. And the fans are happy. And it goes back to the fans. Because we all want to go to the game. We want to feel the natural flow of the game. And that means that every time a try is scored, we're not going through an endless checking and the kicker stopped. Every time we go back to a ruck four phases before because someone slipped up and hit someone accidentally on the head, and we go back, we check it, then the referee runs down the other end depending on what competition you're in. I even saw it in a La Rochelle and Varnes game on the weekend where the referee had to run to the corner to watch the replay of the game. To me, that just kills the natural flow and the natural tempo of the game. So
the solution, what could be done and how quickly do you think it could be done?
It can be done tomorrow, mate. But it's going to take a bit of courage because people are going to complain about whatever way you go, people are going to complain. And rugby's such a opinionated game, and because it's a high society game, rugby, people have a lot of opinions and like to voice it and articulate it, and you're always going to get people offside. But if we go back to say, right, 2 phases before a try you can check, let's check it, and potential foul play, potential red card, the TMO can come in. Otherwise, he stays out of it. No, he can whisper to the referee that he might have missed something, that he can catch up on the next phase. But let's not go back to this endless replay of what's happened in the game. They're easily sorted, mate, easily sorted.
Yeah, okay. And how would it be sorted? So is that a World Rugby responsibility to be able to issue those instructions and to say, okay, this is how it's going to be applied?
Of course it is, because they're the convener of the rules of the game, the laws of the game.
Mm.
They can sort that out in one day, mate. One meeting they can sort that out. But you go into a meeting and say, they have tier 1, tier 2 coaches meetings, and you can have maybe 60% agree with this and 40% not agree, and nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. Like we had the situation with the mall, mate, where we went down to that one stop of the mall, but because a couple of countries didn't like it, I don't know the exact figures, then we've gone back to having 2-stop malls, and we know for the sake of the game at the moment, we need to go to the one-stop mall and make the game more attractive. Because we've got to get flow in the game of rugby. And if we want more people to watch the game, we've got to get better flow.
So we asked our audience, to give us their views, and we received a number of contributions. So thank you very much from the audience. and also out on Reddit. There is lots of conversation on Reddit, but I'll just read this one from Tom Gardner. In my opinion, unsolicited interjection from the TMO induces a lack of faith in on-field officiating. Before every game, the referee discusses with players their refereeing style, focal points and principles. It's an open conversation where players are invited into the discussion. TMO interjection not only has the capacity to contradict the on-field referee's judgment, but also implicitly highlights how referees can oversee the natural flex of rules in a match. The TMO and all technology that comes with it has great benefit, but should be called on as a supplementary tool for the referees, as should the assistant referees. From a commercial standpoint, I also think the TMO tends to make rulings which are frequently nuanced and can easily alienate new viewers. The officiating needs to be simplified to the best extent possible. The obvious caveat to all of the above is any situation which jeopardises player safety, in which case I think the TMO is obliged to advise the referee. So there you have it, Eddie. I think someone who agrees with your views of the world.
That's nicely articulated from Tom. Well done, mate. Hey? He said that really well. But that I think, that almost is a good example of how rugby is, that you've got really well-educated people like Tom who have got a strong view. And then you'll have another 30% who will argue the opposite of it. And the hard thing about rugby is someone making a decision. And that's where World Rugby's, particularly on making the game better. How can they make the game better? That's their big job, is to make the game better. And so more kids want to play it, more people want to get involved, and more people want to watch it, because we know when we get that balance right between contest and continuity, referee intervention and using the sense of the game to play on, we've got a game that's better than any game in the world, because it presents this tactical complexity within this physical battle that no other game in the world has. Mm. And that's what we've got to keep moving back towards, because it can go away from us as it has with technology overrunning the game at the moment.
So interesting then, isn't it, really, to put that as we look at the mission of this particular podcast, talking about securing the future prosperity of the game. Obviously, fans at the centre has to be an underlying principle, as we discussed. More people in more countries caring more about the game, another principle. But really going to that point of decision making at that global World Rugby level. And indeed, this week there will be a council meeting. So I wonder whether or not that may be a point of discussion, is how do we make decisions faster? Because you pointed out the NRL decision of the CEO, where, as you say, it happened overnight. I know in the NFL this year, all of the owners got together for the annual meeting and they make changes, they make decisions, and the decisions get made quickly. The same in the Australian Football League in Australia. Very quickly decisions get made. So how do we get decisions made faster, which are in the best interests of the majority, such that the game can be improved? So I think that's a real challenge and a real undertaking for us as well.
I reckon, mate, if you wore a tie on this podcast, you might be a chance to get an invite to a council meeting.
Maybe. So, Eddie Jones, we'll let you get back to work. I'll get back to work, and I'll certainly get back to enjoying some of the Super Rugby competition as we start to get to the sharper end. There's a bye this weekend, then the final round before the competition. We'll see where everyone lands, but certainly let's hope for the Brumbies that there is further success this year and a great conclusion to what has been a very good competition, and certainly in Europe as well. Certainly the Premiership, some of those big events over there have been gathering huge crowds. Great to see that they've signed a new television deal for the Premiership, and television ratings up as well. So things perhaps in England on the improve, which is great. So I think the mood around the game is pretty good at the moment, and good luck to everyone in the World Rugby Council, this meeting, the new council meeting. Good luck with your deliberations, and I hope things go well for you this week. So Eddie Jones, thank you very much. To you, the audience, thank you very much for coming back once again. Please remember to be kind to each other, and for the moment, my name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.
Follow us on socials and your podcast app, and leave us a rating or review. One sport, millions of voices. Rugby Unity.